Hey everybody, Backpack Hack here, coming at you with another trail tip, part 2 of my 50 ways to make the ice in your cooler last longer. These are going to be tips number 11 through 20. Now if you haven't seen the first video, it's going to be floating up here in the top right of the video, and I'll also put a link to it in the description down below if you're watching this on YouTube. I want to requalify all these tips because it's very important to understand. Not all tips will apply to everybody in every situation and all coolers. Some tips may conflict with others. It's impossible to say whether a specific tip is going to give you so many hours or so many days extra. There's too many variables. I won't get into that. Some of these tips require a regimen with discipline. Some are easy no-brainers. Some will cost considerable money. Some will cost a token amount, lunch money or a cup of coffee, and some are absolutely free. We're not going to be discussing dry ice, salt ice packs, either do-it-yourself or commercially available, or we're not going to be talking about powered coolers, the ones that you plug into your cigarette lighter. And remember, there is no such thing as a magic bullet. There is nothing here that's going to make a cooler that lasted 5 days on your last trip magically last 10 or 12. That doesn't exist. You can't fight the laws of physics. So with that, tips number 11 through 20. Number 11, when you buy ice at a commercial establishment, avoid the machines that are sitting outside, especially when they're in the sun. Now, this isn't a hard, fast rule, but you don't control the temperature of that ice. So you buy what you get. Now, if you're just out for a day trip, a bag of ice from the store is fine, but when you're in it for the long haul, you want a little bit more control of the temperature of the ice. The colder that you can get it, the better. A machine sitting out in the sun may barely keep up with keeping that ice solid. It may be just 2 or 3 degrees below freezing. Therefore, it's really not the best for long term. If you can, go into the store and see if they have a machine inside that is probably more likely to have colder ice. I touched on this in episode 1 of this series as using an infrared thermometer to check the temperature of your ice. If you're buying at a store and taking it home, use a towel, a freezer bag, use the cooler itself to take it home, and then put it in your freezer at home. Because number 13, when you take the ice at home, put it in your cooler, and you can chill it down further. You can get it colder in your freezer at home. You control the temperature, not the store. Number 14, make block ice at home. Use whatever container you can, a cake pan, a bread pan. I use the square margarine and ice cream containers that I have left over from using those. That's what I do. I put a little bit of water in it, put it in the freezer, let it freeze. You don't want to fill it up because it'll burst, ice expands when it freezes. So you want to do it in increments so you don't break the container. Just put a little bit in, put it in the freezer, let it freeze, put a little bit more water in, and just build it up in increments. It takes some time, but you get as cold of ice as possible. Because number 15, when you're making ice, turn your freezer down as far as it will go. That way you have the coldest ice possible to start out with. And then when you put it in the freezer or your cooler, you can go ahead and turn your freezer back up to the temperature you normally keep it. That way you start out with the coldest ice possible. As I mentioned in episode 1 of this series, the temperature of your ice is critical. And the colder the ice you can get, the better off you're going to be for the long term. Number 16, pre-chill or pre-freeze the contents. If you have a product that can be frozen, even if it doesn't need to be frozen when you use it, freeze it. If it doesn't damage it or be harmful to it, or it loses texture or quality. If it can be frozen, freeze it. If it can't be frozen but still needs to be kept cool, put it in your refrigerator. Don't take room temperature stuff and put it into your cooler just before the trip. Put it in your refrigerator, get it down to the 35, 40 degree temperature range, and then put it in your cooler. That way you're not introducing the heat of that subject into the cooler. It's already pre-chilled and pre-frozen. Number 17, nothing goes into the cooler unless it's pre-chilled or pre-frozen. Now, I see this a lot with people doing day trips. They use their cooler as more of luggage than anything else. They'll put some meat and cheese and stuff in there and mayonnaise and what have you for a day trip to the beach or something. And that's fine. That puts your silverware and your plates and your cups, your tableware, paper towels, things like that. I can see, that's okay for a day trip or an overnight trip. But for the long haul, when you're out there for several days, if you have something that does not need to be in your cooler, don't put it in the cooler. Shelf-stable foods do not belong in your cooler. Keep those separate because they'll be just fine. Something that can sit on your shelf and not be affected and not go bad. Pasta, for instance. That's fine at room temperature. You don't need to put pasta in your cooler. Number 19. I see this being violated a lot. A 2-to-1 ice to product ratio. In other words, however much product you have in your cooler, you should have twice as much ice. Meaning if you have a 30-quart cooler, 10 quarts of that should be perishable food. The other 20 quarts should be ice. Don't take a 30-quart cooler, put 25 or 26 or 27 quarts of product in it, and then just sprinkle a liberal amount of just token ice on top, because you're not going to get a very long-lasting cooler on that. Within a couple days, it's going to be room temperature. You need a lot of ice for staying power. So, if you want ice to last a long time, you've got to have a lot of ice to start with. 2-to-1 minimum. So if you need more or larger cooler, get a larger cooler to be able to maintain that ratio. And finally, number 20, pack in reverse chronological order. Plan what you're going to have when, and pack it into your cooler in reverse order. So the last thing you're going to get out of your cooler is at the bottom. The thing you're going to get before that is on top of it. And just reverse order up until when you start your trip. And that way, when you open up your cooler, you can reach in, grab what you want, and close the lid. That way, you aren't sitting there digging through the ice trying to find what you want. Now, I realize some people may think, well, that requires me to have this for supper, and I may not want that for supper that day. But at least it gives you a fighting chance of getting in and out of the cooler quicker, and the more time that you have that door open, or that lid open, the more time that air has a chance to get in and melt that ice. So, pack in reverse chronological order. So what you want is open up the cooler, grab what you want, and there's what you have. Close the lid. This is Backpack Hack coming at you with this trail tip. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share on my videos. Be safe out there. And I'm looking forward to doing episodes 3, 4, and 5 of this series. Be safe out there, and I'll see you out there on the trail.